The Office, and
Have you ever watched?
I guess South Park. But Rick and Morty's like really close.
Rick and Morty
I love
is
that
so
show.
good.
How about a series of unfortunate events?
I haven't seen that.
It's really stupid, so it's funny.
Oh yeah.
Friends.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. That's a bit of a
Friends is
throwback
funny.
though.
The Switch is funny. Riverdale is funny. Orange is the New Black didn't get funny. Bates Motel is also funny.
You're not getting extra credit for going on Google and like listing all these.
But I'm not. But I'm not on Google.
Yeah.
It's on
She's using
Netflix.
bait.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Grace and Frankie right there. Where? Right here.
Okay,
Where?
so I can't give the test back yet because of the NIT last week, but the test average was 89%, which is better than the first exam. And I don't know, I was happy with your grades.
Would you like memes?
So hopefully, I did enjoy the memes. That gave me some good
What
entertainment.
was the meme you were looking for? 'Cause I had no idea.
I was not looking for any meme. It's just like you guys draw me one so I can
Oh,
chuckle.
I drew you like no. Wait, what did I draw you a picture of? It was just
I
the
don't
stupidest thing I've ever done. Mine was like, yeah.
Okay, so I do want to talk real quick about the difference between capital and human capital. So capital is anything that can help you like be more productive at work, that aids in like the production process. So look in this classroom, things like the computer, the projector, the doc cam, these desks, the chairs, your computers, pen, paper, like those things that make you learn better. Or if you're like in a pizza shop, like literally like the ovens, the sinks to clean the stuff. Human capital, on the other hand, is like the knowledge and the skills that you need to complete your job that help you be more productive. So like when you talk about college building human capital, it's giving you the specific skills that you use. So if you're like an accountant, it's like learning what the balance sheet is and what the income statement is and what goes where. And the ability to navigate through those forms. It also includes things like problem solving or critical thinking that you would apply on the job. I think that's really all I want to say about that. There was two things from the extra credit I wanted to point out that I thought really interesting you guys brought up that I haven't talked about. The first is that a signal, like a college education, is an expensive signal. And for a signal to be effective, to show that you're whatever, it needs to be expensive. It needs to be costly to attain. So like if you're not very dumb or you're not motivated, getting good grades graduating college is difficult because you'd rather be out partying, rather spend your money on other things. So it can be an effective signal if you can prevent people that aren't intelligent, aren't motivated from doing it, which is why people consider college an effective signal. But if you can spend like $20 and get like a sheet of paper that says you graduated college and do it in 5 minutes, then anyone can do it, so it's not a good signal. Likewise, if you want to signal something in society, signal that you're an upper class by wearing expensive clothes. You're wearing like Gucci all the time, stuff like that. Again, that's something that's expensive. It's hard for you to do. Like obviously, if you're poor, you're not going to be able to afford like all these like designer brands. So by wearing them, you're showing that like you're rich, you're upper class, like you got this kind of money. Someone mentioned that education is the foundation on which human capital is built, which I thought was a really interesting way to look at it, especially for people that think education is just signaling, saying you're spending this time, you're building the basis, you're learning the skills like critical thinking, thinking outside the box, whatever you want to call it, and getting the background knowledge to teach you how to learn, so when you get on the job, you can build up those skills that your employer wants you to do. And I thought that was a really cool way to look at it, and I don't think I've read anything that's talked about education quite that way. Another thing for the exams, for the short answers, don't leave them blank. Put down something. You just draw like a supply and demand graph or something related to the question. You can get at least a couple like partial credit, 2 points. It'll help out. For the few people who are leaving short answers blanks, I don't want to see you leave points on the table. And finally, probably not the best day to say this, I'll have to say it again, but if your attendance is lacking in class, you've been missing a bunch, your class participation can make up for it. So when we're doing discussions, or if I'm asking questions, if you're answering, like I keep track of that kind of stuff. So you guys can make up for a bunch of missed classes. so you don't hurt your grades that way. And with that, today we're going to start technology, production, and costs. So what is the basic activity of a firm? These damn things work. So from that, what's that?
Are you like asking us or?
Well, first, from an episode of It's Always Sunny, you guys aren't a fan of, that's Danny DeVito's character. When he goes back into his job, he takes Charlie, the illiterate janitor from the bar, under his wing. And Charlie asks him eventually, like, what does that water, like the company they're working for, what do we make? Frank says, what do you mean? Like, how much money does the company make? He goes, oh no, I mean, like, what do we make? Frank says, I don't follow. We make money. And Charlie's trying to ask about the product. And Frank's like, oh no, it's all about the money. Obviously, the firm is more than just making money. I mean, you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders to like earn a profit, to try to maximize like the income for them. But that's not like what the firm does. That's not its basic activity. It's not to, I don't know. So what they want to do is make money, but the question is, how do they go about it? And that's what this chapter is, basically trying to understand the firm's decision-making process. Since most of you are going into business and not someone like me that's going to analyze individual choice, this more matches your focus and the stuff we've been talking about so far. So what firms do is they combine inputs to make a product to sell. So they use workers, they use like machines, think of your physical capital, and they use natural resources, raw materials. And then they produce a good as the output. So technology is a process by which firms turn inputs into outputs. These outputs, the goods and services that they end up making. Some firms don't sell to the direct public, they sell to other businesses. They make what's called intermediate goods. So like, I don't know, a steel mill makes a bunch of raw steel that gets put into a building. That's an intermediate good. Yeah, so technology in terms of firms is more than just the everyday definition, which is typical in econ, that we use words slightly differently than everyone else. It is the process by which firms turn inputs into outputs. So it's not just like labor-saving machines. It's not just like a new nail gun with a bigger clip so you can fit more nails in so you can do it more quickly. It's also new processes and new management techniques. So when Toyota, they revolutionized automaking by becoming more efficient, producing, changing the production methods than like the old, like Chrysler, GM, those old companies. That's considered technology, even though it's like an idea. It's not actually a physical thing that they're doing. So now, technological change is the change in the ability of a firm to produce a given level of output with a given quantity of inputs. So a positive technological change, that's increasing the amount of output produced for that given level of input. So you have the same number of workers, like same amount of capital, maybe just new ideas, and then boom, you become more productive. You're able to do it more effectively. So for an example, Frankie's becomes more efficient. They figure out a better process for handling orders, and your order of cheesy breadsticks, instead of taking like 20, 25 minutes, takes like 15 or 20 minutes. Right? That's an incredible improvement over where they're at now.
My grilled chicken wrap that was that big took 35 minutes.
Did they forget about it, or was it overcooked?
They're making everybody else's food first. I ran in there and freaking pitched them out.
So an example that the textbook gives us is UPS delivering packages. Back in 2013, UPS was delivering like millions of Christmas packages. So as Tom Hanks said in Castaway, we might as well be the post office if we're delivering packages that late. So to correct this, afterwards, what UPS did was they hired more workers and they purchased more capital. So things like airplanes, maybe they added more sorting facilities. But more trucks go out. So So it decided instead to improve the technology to make its workers more efficient. Oh, sorry, they could have, not that they did, they could have bought more, spent more money to become larger. Instead, they improved the technology. So they developed new scanners, they had better maps, those sorts of things. Different management techniques. Maybe they cost money to develop. It takes time for people to sit around and come up with new ideas. But things that aren't expensive, like hiring new people and purchasing big capital things. Planes are crazy expensive to buy.
I like how they have a FedEx one too.
Well, that's in the movie. You worked for FedEx.
Did you take pictures out of the slides at the book green and then?
Yeah, they had like a FedEx sorting facility or something. But I thought Tom Hanks shirtless on an island with a FedEx box was funnier.
Yeah.
So we need to separate time into two periods when we're looking at production costs. When you look at the short run and the long run. So I'm sure you can imagine what short run and long run mean, but they do have specific definitions. So in the short run, that's the period of time where at least one input is fixed. So in the short run, facilities, things like the factory or the store, the office, like where the business is located, those are fixed. You're under lease for say a year, 5 years, 10 years, so you're stuck there. You can't change that for a while. Technology in the short run, that's also often fixed. You can't innovate every single day. You can't constantly bring in new machines or put in new management techniques because obviously these things take time to implement and time to come up with. And for capital, like I said, the technology machines are expensive, time to install, you got trained workers. Workers are the easiest to be variable. You can hire someone more easily than you can do any of these other things. You can hire new ones. You can also extend the hours of current workers, have them work overtime based on what the demand is. But the key to remember is that in the short run, one of those is fixed. That you can't change one of those, so you've got to work within that constraint. In the long run, the firm can vary all its inputs. You can do new technology, get a new plant, put an addition on a plant, whatever you want to do, however you want to change it, as possible. Now the actual length of the short run versus long run is different for every company. Firms with a super short lease, and then with empty space in the place they're leasing, they can add more capital, they can get out of their lease and go somewhere else. Their short run could even be a couple of weeks. I don't know if they're renting week to week. Imagine just one person renting a small office to do work on their own, I don't know, consulting or something like that. Maybe they can do that quickly. Meanwhile, you got large factories, universities, that their long run is much longer. It's years, or even decades. It's hard to imagine St. Francis just picking up and moving somewhere else at this point because of how much money they have sunk into this place. And how long it takes to build a new college. So long run is just long enough for anything about a company to be able to be changed. Now, by splitting up time into two periods, that gives us two different sort of costs. We have variable costs. These are costs that change as the output changes. This is very similar to accounting if you've been taking accounting classes. So the variable costs, they include wages, the cost of electricity, raw materials, shipping costs. And you can imagine why, you can vary wages, you can pay people extra, you can hire new people, have them work more hours, all those sorts of things, change wages as you change production. The cost of electricity, if you're open longer, you're producing more hours, it's open, that's more electricity. The raw materials, if you're producing more, you're making more steel, you got to get more metal to make the steel. Now fixed costs, they remain constant as output changes. This includes rental costs, insurance, advertising, the stuff that no matter how many units you produce, you're still going to have this cost. So the cost of the building of Schwab itself that's a fixed cost. But the cost of the electricity, the heat in here, I don't know, the number of desks we put in here, that's a variable cost, so we could change that. St. Francis can change that very quickly. And all costs can be classified as either fixed or variable in the short run. So, so your total cost of production for a firm is the fixed cost plus the variable cost. And that's how we abbreviate it. TC equals FC plus VC. The fixed cost and variable cost. So, for an example, let's look at costs in the soft drink industry. So you look at a beverage company. Take Frank Fluids, the overarching company that produces things like Fight Milk, Wolf Cola, Crotein. They turn its inputs, so intellectual property, labor, the actual like bottling and canning machines that they have in their facilities, things like sugar, the crow eggs they need for Fight Milk and Crotein, the factory, the building itself, the electricity put into it. All these inputs, the firm combines into outputs, which is these beverages. Now, as it increases the number of drinks of bottles, so the more the company makes, some of those inputs stay the same and some of them rise. So any of you guys want to toss out which ones they have in the examples or that the example doesn't mention that you think stay the same or rise? So which ones are fixed and which ones are variable?
Variable ones would be like the sugar. And the
Yeah.
is labor variable too, maybe?
Yeah, labor would be variable. If you've got to like work overtime, you got to hire more workers.
Yeah. Well, intellectual property and factory, electricity variable, you're probably right.
Yeah.
So then electricity or intellectual property factory. Fixed cost.
Yeah, they would be fixed costs. The bottle and canning machines are fixed costs.
And everything else is variable.
Yeah. Because all those short run or all those variable costs, they can change in the short run, but the fixed costs they're not changing. So remember that economists measure cost as opportunity cost, is what you have to give up in order to get that next unit. So so you have to consider both explicit cost and implicit cost. So an implicit cost is the opportunity cost. It's a non-monetary value. Well, explicit cost is the cost that involves spending money. In the words of Randy Moss, straight cash, homie. This is stuff you're shelling out money for in order to bring in. So it's important to remember that firms face both of these costs, not just what they're actually paying out, so paying out wages, raw materials, rent, whatever, but also that they're giving up value for other things. Because they're buying, more units of labor, they're not able to buy more capital. They face these sorts of trade-offs that everyone faces. So implicit costs, they're harder to find. You have to think around and identify alternatives, while explicit costs are really easy. They're written right there on the balance sheet. Or income statement. Yeah, I think balance sheet. I don't know enough accounting. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, so the example they give here is if you own your own firm, you probably spend time working on the firm's activities. You're doing stuff, for the business. So even if you don't pay yourself for the time, it's an opportunity cost. Say you're owning a restaurant and you're working, 50 hours a week. You're giving up, say you work a regular job, you're giving up 10 hours of leisure. That's still a cost that you face, that working 50 hours, even though you're being paid for it, because you're giving up other things. Now we're going to go through a long example to explain this more. So I apologize I couldn't change this to any sort of It's Always Sunny or like Office sort of example, but they had a bunch of graphs with Jill Johnson's thing on it, so I couldn't it would take me forever to redo all those. All right, so this is a I don't know, a graph showing the cost for Jill Johnson. Jill Johnson quits her job, pays her $30,000 a year. She doesn't open a pizza store in Loretto because we don't have anywhere that sells pizza anymore. She uses $50K of her savings to buy a bunch of equipment. So things like the furniture, the pizza ovens, all the stuff they need in the kitchen to cook, dishwashers, stuff like that. And she also takes out a loan in addition to using her savings. So these items in red up there. So the pizza dough, the tomato sauce, the ingredients, the wages, the interest payments on that loan she bought, the electricity, and the lease for the store. These are all explicit costs. This is the money she's shelling out in order to buy this stuff. Like, now the items in blue, the foregone salary, the salary that she gave up from her old job, the foregone interest, that would have been the interest on her savings had she left it, I don't know, in the bank or whatever she had invested in, and the economic depreciation, so the value that's lost on her capital goods. Because every time you use something, like the value of it goes down. Like you buy a new car, you drive it off the lot, it's worth less. You put 10,000 miles on it, it's worth a lot less when you go to resell it. That's the concept of depreciation. In addition, in the implicit costs, she should also include having to move to Loretto, the Loretto area. That can be considered substantial implicit costs for a lot of people. So all these implicit costs are the real costs of her moving the store, even though she's not shelling out money. It's important to remember that this idea of trade-offs. It works in businesses as well as it does for individuals. Implicit costs also include the other jobs she could have taken. So say there were job openings somewhere else, that there's a job opening at like Sheetz Corporate that paid $50,000 a year. That's another explicit or implicit cost of $50,000 that she forewent to open her own pizza shop. She could have started her own high-end shoe company, Shoe La La, industrial strength vacuum cleaner for the home Suck It, maybe like a Safer Grill, the Magic No Ouchie meat machine. Those are some of Michael Scott's inventions. Oh no, I guess Suck It was who was that? That was David Wallace when he was unemployed. But something you should note in the previous slide, Jill is thinking about she's charging herself for her implicit costs. Charging herself for like the money she took out of savings, just like the bank when they charge her a loan. She's treating these implicit costs exactly the same as explicit costs. All right, so Jill Johnson's restaurant, like any other firm, they take their inputs, their pizza ovens, the ingredients, the labor, the electricity, and they turn those into pizzas that they sell to people. So to make the analysis simple, we're only going to consider two of the inputs. We're going to look at the pizza ovens and the workers. Obviously, a lot more goes into it, but for the sake of this analysis and to understand what's going on, all we need to do is look at those two. So the pizza ovens, they're a fixed cost. We're going to assume that she can't change the number of ovens she has in a very short run. That's a longer run thing she can change. And then the workers are going to be the variable costs. We'll assume that Jill can easily change the number of workers she hires. If there's a lot of unemployed or underemployed people in the Loretto area that are just chomping at the bit to work at a pizza shop. All right, so here we have her short-run production and the short-run production costs at Jill's restaurant. So if we look at this, we have I'll walk over point. When we have 0 workers, we still have 2 pizza ovens. So her fixed cost is still $800, even though she's not producing anything. That's because she had to pay for those 2 pizza ovens herself. So no matter what she does, you see here, there's always that $800. That's your fixed cost. Then as she adds more workers, 1 to 2 to 3, 4, and so on, they're producing more pizza each week. Obviously, the more workers you have somewhere, the more they're gonna be able to do stuff. Right here, we have the cost of those workers. So she's paying them each a $650 salary. Per week. So these are increasing steadily each time she hires a new worker. So the total cost of pizza is gonna be $800 plus the $650 times however many workers they have. And from that, we can compute the average total cost per pizza. And you can see it starts to go down at first, and then in this case, it begins to increase again. This whole thing right here is the firm's production function. How it takes the variable inputs and the fixed inputs, and then turns them into outputs. Like it says, with more workers, Jill can obviously produce more pizzas. But eventually, we're going to see a problem with hiring more workers. Oh, that's just the same thing I said. $800 fixed cost, and it goes up $650 for each worker employed. So using this information from the table, we can turn into a graph, because economists love graphs. And we can graph the cost for Jill's restaurant. This right here is a graph of total cost. Remember, it's not going to start at 0. It's going to start up here at 800. You got to buy those ovens. And then from there, total cost goes up. Obviously, as she's going to make more pizzas, the more she produces, the more it's going to cost. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but notice over time it starts out, the cost starts out increasing slowly and then increases much more rapidly. We're going to talk about why in a second. So if we divide the total cost of the pizzas by the number of pizzas that they actually produce, we can get the average total cost of the pizza. So here we see for the low levels of production, the average cost falls as the number of pizza rises. We go from $7.50 to $4.67, but then we start going up as we produce more, $5, $5.67, and so on. So the average total cost curve ends up being U-shaped. It falls, then rises. This happens not just for Jill. This isn't a weird example. This is what happens basically for all businesses. Does anyone have a guess for why this would be the case? Why the costs are decreasing and then increasing again?
I'd say it was related to sales, but I guess I don't think
Well, it would have something to do with sales because they do have to sell the pizza.
I mean, if she's hiring more workers and they're not selling them than before.
You're on the right track there. Okay, so let's take this back to the beginning. Suppose Jill hires just one more worker, or just one worker. She went from 0 to 1 because she's not doing the stuff herself. So that one worker, they have to take orders. They've got to make the pizza, they take pizza to the tables, run the cash register. They're doing literally everything there. If you've ever worked at a place that's understaffed or worked by yourself, you know just how hectic that can be. So they hire another worker. The task can be divided up between them. So maybe say one takes the orders and then takes a pizza to the tables. The other one's in there cooking and then runs the cash register. They split up the jobs, which allows them to produce even more. When workers specialize like this in a business, people focus on their own individual tasks and only on them. That's called the division of labor. We'll talk about that more in depth later, but by dividing up the labor, people focusing on the individual jobs, they can become much more skilled at those positions, become a lot more productive because they're only focusing on that one thing, so they know what they're doing. and firms become much more productive. That's why, Henry Ford creating the assembly line made him so much more productive than when one person would build a car, like from scratch. People work on just one job, they get really fast at it. And obviously, 2 workers can produce more output than 1 worker can alone. So this is what happens is Jill hires even more workers. So to think about this, we're going to keep in mind the marginal product of labor, the additional product that's being produced by each additional unit of labor. We're starting with 1 worker. That 1 worker is making 200 pizzas. So the marginal part of labor for that 1 worker, 200. The second worker, or when they hire the second worker, combined they will make 450 pieces. More than double. So now the 450 minus the 200 is the 250. So that second worker was able to make 250 pizzas to increase production by that much. But then from there they bring in a third worker. They're able to make 550 pizzas. 550 minus 450. So that this next additional labor only brought in 100 more pizzas, or produced 100 more pizzas. She brings in a fourth, they only make 600. It's still more, but now it's only 50 more than before. So as we see, eventually, as we're adding workers, those workers are becoming less productive. Their marginal product of labor is decreasing. So each worker adds to the output. They're still making more, but it's not as much. Think of it, eventually they start getting each other's way. They got some downtime, so they start slacking. Maybe they play little games at work. You guys ever play games at work to like mess around and kill time?
Depends on how busy the day is.
We used to play. I worked in the warehouse at a furniture factory. We had like a bunch of free time, so we had games. We had one, we called it Saki. We took like a paper towel roll, like cut it in half and wrapped it in like a couple socks and then like taped it up. And then we kicked it like a football and like some uprights we taped on the wall. I'm trying to think. Well, they did the whole episode of The Office Olympics, where they just like screwed around the whole time and like played their different games. That sort of stuff kills productivity, and that's why as you hire more workers, we tend to see, eventually, we see the marginal product of labor drop off. And I think that's easy to imagine why. And also, you notice capital's fixed. She's got 2 pizza ovens, so you bring in a fourth person, you've got 2 ovens full, and you've got someone on the register. That other person isn't helping make pizzas anymore. They're kind of standing around doing other stuff, but maybe they're not constantly working, or what they're constantly working at is maybe they're scrubbing like the walls or doing stuff that doesn't really matter. It helps make the place nicer, but doesn't really matter. So this is called the law of diminishing returns. At a certain point, adding more of a variable input, so in this case adding more labor to the same amount of fixed input, capital, in this case the pizza ovens, cause the marginal product of the variable input to decline. So the marginal product of labor in this case is declining as we add more people once we pass, 2 employees. Let's see what slide I'm on. I had a note for one. We skipped it. All right, so here we have the graphs for the output of output and of marginal product. So this will allow us to see the law of diminishing returns more clearly. So on top here we have the total output. So at first, we go from 0 to 1, we're increasing. 1 to 2, increasing even more. And 2 to 3, slowing down. So we can see diminishing returns after number 2. Instead of like increasing more sharply, slopes going towards 0. Now eventually, it'll turn negative. If she's got 40 people crammed in that place, they're gonna probably be producing less pizza than if they had, 4 or 5. They're just in the way, they're screwing around too much. They literally can't move past each other. They'll be producing less. You can see this also very clearly in the bottom, the marginal product. You see the marginal product increase there, and then you see it decrease going down. Now just to note, bottom line here, that's the x-axis, that's 0. So this is still positive. Marginal product of labor has not gone negative yet. It's still positive, it's just decreasing at a lower rate. For those of you who took calculus, the thing at the bottom is the rate of change, the first derivative. So, how do we overcome the law of diminishing returns? Is there any way to defeat this? You guys think? Obviously not in the short run, but over the long run.
I don't know, just like, in the long run, you can like find out what the right amount of work is. And once you start like owning the pizza shop for like a decent amount of time, you know how much like business you get on the regular. It's not like business, like it's not like sales. After like a few months, like, it's not like sales will go like increasingly higher. So like just finding out what that kind of thing.
So you're thinking how to maximize the marginal product of labor?
Yeah.
You think through trial and error you can figure it out?
Yeah.
Not just trial and error. You can look and see what's going on, and see if people are standing around doing nothing, or if they're like running around and need more help. That's something you can do in the short run. That's not too difficult. Any idea what in the long run is gonna help us? No, I don't have it there. Add more fixed capital. So, our pizza entrepreneur, she can add more ovens. Add a third oven, boom, now those workers aren't taken away from production. They're helping increase production. Maybe build a bigger kitchen. If she owns a place, she can add on a little addition to the side. Maybe add on I don't know, maybe it's a storefront, knock out the wall, buy the place next to it, have a big seating area, and then be able to expand the kitchen that way. Go to add more fixed capital, then you can hire more workers, make them even more productive. So that's, in the short run, law of diminishing returns is iron. It's an iron law, you can't like overcome it, but in the long run, you can. All right, so let's take a break there. How many of you guys do watch The Office?
I've watched
Okay. Well, I was watching season 9 last night. I had it on while I was like doing other stuff, and because that's like the worst season. And my roommate and I were like bitching about how much Jim and Pam actually suck.
Is that the last season?
Yeah.
Or bottles.
Well, their relationship is just not
Wait, who sucks?
Jim and Pam.
I hate their relationship, and I think it's the biggest thing I've ever seen. And he's like a little girl.
And she like, it was funny, like she went to like the art thing and he was like totally cool with that. Well, he kept encouraging her to do it. And then like he wanted to do the Philly thing. She's like, no, you can't start your own company, even though he's miserable at Dunder Mifflin. I don't know. I think Bob Vance and Phyllis are way better. Their relationship goals. Okay, so when we talk about costs and benefits, in economics, especially like so far in here, we tend to put these things into money. We've been talking about things in monetary terms. It's easy to compare them when you consider things in money because it's just one give you a dollar value of this versus dollar value of that. But obviously, not all costs and benefits are in dollar terms and can be thought about in dollar terms. there's, I don't know, you want people to have a positive view of you, you want to make friends. I don't know. Look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you want to reach the top is with self-actualization. There's more than just money in the world. So what we use to measure like welfare right now is gross domestic product. It's like the sum of the value of all the goods produced in an economy. You guys think that's like a good measure of human welfare? Or do you think there's a way to get a better measurement? Or do you think it's just like it's too difficult to do, so we just need to look at like random snapshots like that, include other things? The guy who came up with GDP like as a measure, like I want to say it was like before Congress, but I don't know. They were like debating this back in like the 50s and 60s, and he said like guys, this isn't the silver bullet. This isn't everything we need. But they said, oh no, this is great. We're gonna use it.
No, we're gonna know, right?
I mean, it's a good measure to show like obviously you need things to be happy. Like, you need food, clothing, shelter. I'd rather have more than less. I think that's a pretty common belief among people, but
There's more to it.
yeah, does it capture anything? And is there a way to capture
So
everything?
do you think?
Do happiness, like
So do you think money buys happiness?
No. Money can buy you
Money
things that will
can't-
make you
money can't buy
temporarily
anything.
happy. No.
Money can't buy it?
Money can make you temporarily happy, but in the long run,
You buy
Okay.
things with money.
Okay.
If you're
You
homeless.
need like a minimum
That's-
amount of money.
yeah, that's a.
Money.
I think that's
Higher
it's the
level.
theory behind the universal basic income is that you need a certain amount to be a happy person.
And then after
If you're
that-
homeless, are you
but I
happy?
don't think, that doesn't make sense.
You could be
because
skipped from Crescent.
There could be a
If
homeless
I'm
person.
homeless,
He's not homeless.
I don't
He's
think
home
we'd be
free.
happy.
No, not happy, you're not living the way you wanna live, but like, if that, like, okay, my mom's friend's mom had like this problem, and she wanted to be homeless, so like that made her happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can be happy doing whatever you want.
I think it's easier to be happy if you have money. All things equal, I prefer more money to less money. I'm not going to work 90 hours a week
Yeah, you can.
to make that money.
But there are studies
I don't,
there are studies about like where people are happiest, like on surveys and stuff. I can't remember. I can't remember what the source is,
Yeah,
but like Switzerland is one of the highest, like happiness countries, and they're not like leading in GDP or anything. Like
Good-
you'd think
good
that the
GDP.
US would be.
it's not bad, but yeah. We
Or like GDP per capita is what they use.
Yeah, I think GDP per capita is better than GDP because, I mean, China's enormous because they have so many more people, but they still have a lower GDP than a lot of countries. But there's definitely something to like that, just like a sense of community, like having like a group of friends around you. I don't know, enjoying where you live.
And they also
That brings happiness. You can't put in. I don't know, you can put that in GDP numbers, but then survey data is kind of unreliable. How do people gauge your happiness? Like, there's no objective standard. I think if you wanted to look at, like, do you want to live in this country? All right, yeah, if we're looking at countries living, like, what figures would you look at?
how many people are trying to get in? Like how many people are moving into that country and how many people are like
I like that.
becoming citizens.
You can tell how many other people think highly of that place.
That could be.
Because obviously, I'm not just looking at GDP per capita. If I want to move to a different country.
But I guess like that also depends on like how bad the countries are surrounding it, because maybe like there's a country that's doing like okay, but there's a bunch of countries around it that are doing really bad, so they're all going to the okay like that.
Yeah, that's something else to consider.
So, I don't know.
I don't know. Say there's one country in like Eastern Europe that's pretty good, and the rest is like Bosnia, like Croatia, all those countries that were like they had civil war, 15, 20 years ago. Everyone's swinging those to get to a decent place. That's something to take into account. Definitely think in that case, happiness survey would be something to look at. Some sort of happiness survey. It might not be. It's not gonna tell you everything,
How
but
happy are
yeah,
you?
you can generally gauge. Oh, these are like happy communities. whatever they're doing there, they're doing something right.
Maybe like length of life, because there's like, there are some like studies that also link like how happy you are to how long you live.
Yeah, that's another good one to look at.
I don't believe in that.
Living longer?
Yeah.
You want to die early?
I mean, not that I want to.
Die young, live that course.
It's definitely more about like how, like how you live, not like how long, like, you know.
There's a really good TED talk though, that. It's like how
He's saying there's a link between like living long and being happy.
Yeah.
The happier people
the
tend to
happier
live
you are,
longer.
the longer you
You're
live.
stressed and tired.
Yeah, because all things being equal, like just I wouldn't not all things. I wouldn't want to like be miserable but live to 100. It was like the joke where the guy's like, yeah, I don't drink, I don't gamble, I don't womanize, I don't eat healthy food, and they looked he's like, yeah, I live to be 100. And the guy looked at me and he's like, well, what's the point of living that long? You can't do it.
A weird day. Walk. Not piss.
Not piss water. Not your Coors Light.
Not natty.
What about the new special natty, the summertime,
That penguin.
the natty shanty, or I don't know what they call it,
Natty.
Saturdays.
natter days. That's like the classy natty, right? You got to put down like a little like champagne flute.
Yeah, that's,
Classy natty.
that's the one that the
Classy
freshman
natty
girls
that-
put the pinky up with.
I thought those were like La Maritas. All right. So let's get back to this average product of labor. This is another way to look at output. Looking at the average product of labor, the average of what's being put out. So you can calculate this, the total output produced by a firm divided by the quantity of the workers that are producing it. So if we've got 3 workers here at the restaurant and they can make 350 pizzas, in this example, the average product of labor is 550 divided by 3, so 183.3. But you could also think of the average, or you could also think of the average product of labor as the average of the marginal products of labor. So the first 3 workers, they make 200, 250, and 100 pizzas, like themselves. So you add the 3 of them up, which makes 550, and then divide that by 3. We look at the average product of labor for 2 workers, 200 plus 250, we're looking at 225. So in this case, the 3rd worker that Joe brought in made the average product of labor decrease. Remember, that was only 183. Because the 3rd worker had a lower marginal product of labor. Their marginal product of labor there, you see, was only 100. First 2 were 200 and 250. Just another way to illustrate the law of diminishing returns. To show the average product labor goes down as you add more employees that aren't as productive as the original employees. If your next worker, if they produce more, so going from the first, so say the average product of labor for the first employee in this case is 200. When you add in the second one, it's 225 because the second one has a higher marginal product of labor. So if your next worker makes more than your previous 2 did, you're going to increase the average product of labor. So let's look at an example for marginal and average GPAs, or your like semester GPA and cumulative GPA. So I think this is a good metaphor to explain the average product of labor and marginal product of labor. So Paul's GPA as a freshman starts out poorly. Starts out with a 1.5. Next semester he gets a 2.0, then a 2.20, then a 3.0. So his GPA each semester starts low and starts increasing before like his senior year it starts going down again, which is pretty common. People stumble down the stretch. They've got a lot of other stuff going on. Now in this case, his cumulative GPA, which is the average, as we see, it doesn't increase as rapidly as his like semester GPAs do. Obviously, you're averaging 1.5 and 2, so 1.75 is going to be below that. His cumulative, that GPA, this average, increasing much more slowly. I noticed when his semester GPA starts to dip down below his cumulative GPA, so starting here and there, you see the average start to dip. As it was increasing, or at least above the cumulative GPA, it was the cumulative was still increasing. Even though like here, like it went down, it was still above this, so it brought it up. And he ends up with a 2.41 cumulative GPA, which isn't too good. Okay, so how much time do we have left? 9:03. Well, all right. I don't want to start this yet, so we can't finish it today. So I guess I will let you guys head out. It's Thursday, which is like Friday in academia, according to Father Malachi.